So, welcome this afternoon. We have this webcast to our other three campuses as well, so there are people on the other end of the video. I think many of you are here because you know Professor Landry's work, which is internationally and nationally famous now for helping pre-K children learn. I've just had a very fascinating hour with her myself, learning some of the nuances. So it's a great pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for coming. I'm hoping we can talk her into being a long-term friend of the campus and maybe come here with her family on sabbatical one time to help us with some of the pressing issues we have in the local area. I was telling her how guilty I feel that only 10 to 15 miles south of this campus we have some of the most pressing, urgent child care and child development areas there are. And I have a slightly guilty conscience being the CITRIS director because we spend a lot of money sending our students to remote Africa and remote India to do wonderful things, and they really do wonderful things. I'm not criticizing that, but right here on our doorstep are some of the most pressing learning environments that we'd like to try and help with. So that was the sort of genesis for me inviting Professor Landry here, having been guided to her work several years ago by one of my own sons, actually. And so it's a great honor for me and a great personal pleasure to see her with us today. So even though we're a modest group and there are many people out there on the internet, let's give her a round of applause to welcome
her. Thanks for coming out today. I'm not sure I need this mic, but I guess I do for the video.
Do for the other okay. That are the other end. Yeah.
I'm going to sort of talk about three different phases of this scale-up program, what initiated the need for it, and then how we came to solve what was a pretty large problem in a large state, which has very similar challenges to California in terms of fast-growing population of young children, a lot of low-income issues, and English as a second language for many of these children. So, Texas has a very fast-growing child population, and I actually was out here for another event talking with some of the folks from New Jersey, and that's a state that has a declining child population, young child population. So not every state is growing at the same rate, but Texas and I'm sure California have a very fast growing child population. And currently, I'm going to talk about programs serving low-income 3- and 4-year-olds. And currently in Texas, there are almost 800,000 across all income levels. About 30%, just under 30%, meet poverty guidelines. The national average is about 21%. So it's a very large number of kids that need to be served. Very typical of other states, there's 3 main service delivery venues. Public school, some states have more public school for 3- and 4-year-olds than others. Texas actually invests quite a bit of money in state public school, pre-K. Head Start is a federal program, and for very low income, probably some of the lowest income families, and licensed child care, which could be for-profit, a lot of mom and pop, small home-based or small center-based, or it could be faith-based, a lot of faith-based or YMCA, not-for-profit programs. And in the state, there are almost 300,000 children being served in those programs. Prior to some legislation that we responded to with these studies, none of these programs work together. That's not unusual. They're very distinct silos and different cultures, different eligibility criteria, but they're all in the same neighborhoods, and it makes it very tricky for families to know who should I go to, who will serve my child best, who has, I really need flexible hours, but I'm not sure that child care center down the street will give me the same impact for my child as the public school setting. So this is a frequent dilemma in many states. The legislators in Texas decided that it was time for that silo problem to be changed. And they passed legislation that said to the state center, which I direct at the Children's Learning Institute, the State Center for Early Childhood, figure out a solution that brings these programs together in communities, give them a model, a set of resources, whether that's curriculum or professional. They didn't say what those resources should be, that allow any one of them to get the child ready for kindergarten, using similar approaches, addressing similar standards, having a similar goal of getting kids into kindergarten better prepared than they currently are to meet the challenges of learning to read, early math, etc. And one of the things they were trying to avoid is in Texas, there's a rule, a mandate, that any town that has at least 15 children that meet state eligibility criteria for pre-K, income-wise, have to be served with a pre-K program. So school districts are fast in building more and more buildings, putting out bond issues and charging taxpayers a lot of money to house these children because they need facility, they need classrooms. In the meantime, when that occurs, child care goes out of business. The profit margin in child care requires that you have the whole age range. The babies and toddlers are much more expensive to serve than the 3, 4, 5-year-olds. If the school district takes the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, then the child care can't stay in business. Then the welfare to work programs start to fail because we don't have any place for the families to take their children to be cared for. So they wanted to avoid losing an important industry, the child care industry. So they said, let's bring these programs together, break down the barriers, have school teachers teaching in child care facilities with state dollars. So we get a 4-year degree teacher potentially in a child care facility, even if it's a mom and pop operation down the street from the school building. So it meant, hi Ann, it meant breaking down barriers in the way these guys did business and really seeing shared resources, teachers, buildings, common goals, common standards. What I'm going to talk about today are the 3 bullets highlighted in blue. We needed a comprehensive instructional framework in order to make this happen. While public schools had degreed teachers, they often had degree teachers that weren't trained in early childhood specifically. They might have been 3rd grade teachers who weren't getting kids prepared to do the state test, so they were demoted to be pre-K teachers. That was a common practice. So even though we had 4-year degree teachers in pre-K, they were often very poorly trained for the job. Child care, on the other hand, rarely had a degree, a teacher with a degree. Often a high school degree was what you saw in the child care settings. So we had very different expertise and training in these settings. So we needed a comprehensive framework of training, of curriculum, of methods for monitoring children's learning. These were things we were trying to develop that would be effective across all settings. And that included this professional development. And this is what we decided we probably needed to test out. Curriculum that was research-based in terms of having all the components of early literacy, early math, vocabulary building, language building, that the research was now highlighting was important to be occurring for 3- and 4-year-olds in their programs. Professional development, and while we had developed something that was effective in the state in a workshop approach, face-to-face, small groups, in a large state, we could see this was not going to work. We could never train everybody in a face-to-face approach out of our shop and keep up with teacher turnover and the growing need for this. And so we were looking at technology as a way to meet this demand. And then we knew progress monitoring was an important component, but we were interested in whether progress monitoring in and of itself, just the teacher doing short assessments of all the key learning domains, would be enough, or did it need to be something that automatically gave the teacher feedback and sort of grouped and organized the data for the teacher, given these various different levels of education that we were dealing with. So after doing this in a face-to-face approach in Texas, in workshop approach, and finding it to be effective, at least the professional development, we submitted for an IERI grant. It's a grant that the National Science Foundation, NIH, and Institute of Educational Science partner, and its purpose is to take something that's been found to be effective on a small scale and bring it to scale. And so with that grant, we were able to develop with a technology group who was based in New York and now in San Francisco, Teachscape, a web-based internet professional development program that I'll talk about in a minute, that incorporated everything we had done in these extensive workshops in a face-to-face approach. We wanted to test out the effectiveness of this web-based approach, and we wanted to ask, in addition, did we get an added benefit if we added progress monitoring approaches that would allow the teacher to individually assess children's vocabulary, early math, letter knowledge, phonological awareness, and get feedback about how children were learning, and also information on what instructional activities to do next, versus just do those assessments and figure it out for herself without this automatic sort of feedback in a pencil paper approach. And then the added benefit of an in-classroom mentor versus no mentor. So we developed 9 courses from our workshop format. Each course targeted a different area in the literacy skill domains like phonological awareness. Another course was alphabet knowledge. Written expression was a third. Went through all the literacy. Several courses on language building, book reading, math, and there were a long course on training the coaches in how to coach and mentor. So the teachers met in groups of about 15 with a facilitator. Because we were dealing with this workforce of usually women, that's why I keep saying she, there are very few men in the early childhood programs, and we had high school to typically maybe 4-year degrees, rarely much more than that. And we were working with teachers from a culture that believed, for the most part, it was good just to let children play and learn on their own. Discovery. This really was, as recent as 7 years ago, the predominant sort of philosophy. So we were trying to engage teachers and have them decide there were other things that they could be effective in doing with their children to help them learn. Thus, we decided not to take Teachscape's typical approach with elementary and junior high teachers, which was a lot of text and often a self-directed approach. We felt there had to be a facilitator and that it had to be heavily driven by videotaped examples of real teachers in real classrooms so that they had believable models and then a lot of expert commentary from people all over the country that were well known by early childhood teachers in particular areas like phonological awareness or early math. So they came together in these groups. This became their learning community. A sideline that we didn't expect was that this learning community became very important to these teachers. Many times in elementary schools, there's one pre-K classroom in the building of pre-K through 5th grade or 6th grade. That lone early childhood teacher is pretty odd to the rest of the folks and usually gets the short end of the stick because her kids have to eat lunch when it's, you know, not the time for the other kids, or when there's state testing going on, her little guys have to work around that. And so this gave them a chance to come together with other people like themselves and talk and share. And what became critical about this in terms of facilitating the effectiveness is they were sharing across these different service delivery programs. So that high school degree teachers were sharing with public school teachers, with Head Start teachers who had in the past not respected each other. Public school teachers typically looked down on child care teachers. Child care teachers thought public school teachers were too academic and didn't understand young children. So we had all sorts of preconceived attitudes and biases that started to break down in these learning groups. So that part was critically important, at least for this learning community, versus independent, self-directed learning using technology. They typically found a lab setting, a high school lab or a junior college lab in their community where they could all come together. So we refer to this web-based program as eCIRCLE, and this is just sort of one of the brochures that Teachscape uses to market it. But you'll see that there's a large number of courses. The teachers do this in the group, but then they're asked to post and talk to each other online. To go back, they get homework assignments. They're to try something, a certain type of book reading with a extension activity, having the kids act out the story to help their remembrance of the sequence of the plot. And then they post that and they talk to each other during the week or 2 weeks. At some point this goes from a weekly session to every other week. For the different studies we've done, the teachers have been given an incentive of either linking it to college credit with colleges in their community and or a stipend for the extra time they put in. The progress monitoring system is on a PDA initially. Now we have a company that has it on a laptop. The child is not doing anything with technology in this case. It's all for the teacher. And she's doing fluency approaches with vocabulary learning, letter knowledge learning. Then she's doing a phonological awareness screening. Currently we're putting math on. It's been done paper pencil, but now the companies are getting it on the PDA and the computer, as well as a social emotional checklist or rating scale. And once this is done, and it takes about 15 minutes a child each time the teacher does it, she syncs it in the computer and she gets a computerized printout of how her children are gaining in skills, in learning. It groups the children for her by ability, and most importantly, it tells her what type of instructional activities to do with which groups of children next for each skill area. So that's the piece of this that seems to be most important, you'll see in a minute. The pencil paper is the exact same measures, but none of that feedback is given to the teacher. It's up to her to get the feedback out of it, which, given their schedules and exhaustion, at the end of every day, they're much less likely to be doing. And so this was done in collaboration with Wireless Generation. They also have the opportunity to take anecdotal notes, and we try to always give the teachers the type where they can take photographs. They love to be able to photograph the kids, writing samples, etc. So it looks like this. They get many different screens that organize their class for them, that give them sort of trajectories of learning across time. They can get individual reports. They can share those with parents. They have each of these screens where they're determining a correct or incorrect response, and it's timed and they're cued when to move forward, which helps with a more standard approach. The fluency measures we found when we did pencil paper or without the cue to move forward, teachers often would sit and say to the child, "Do you know this one? Come on, think about it." When in fact it's a 60-second fluency and we don't want the clock ticking while she sits. So in this large study, which took place in 4 states, we had a comparison group, all random assignment, that did whatever they would typically do. We did not manipulate them. We had then 4 conditions. They all had the same online professional development program, the one I've been describing. But they were then randomly assigned to have that plus the PDA, progress monitoring with the feedback, with a mentor or without a mentor, or pencil paper with a mentor, without a mentor. Limited feedback being the pencil paper, detailed being the PDA. Okay? We were in the Columbus, Ohio area with Head Start, 2-year degree teachers. We were in Maryland in public schools with 4-year degree teachers, Prince George County outside of Washington. Florida, Miami in childcare, very challenging. Nobody with much more than a high school year of college in those settings. And in Corpus Christi, Texas, with a balance of all 3. Random assignment of children out of each classroom. Usually 6 to 8 children per classroom were randomly selected for assessment. Of that group, about 50% were boys, and we had just under 30% that were learning English as a second language. The teachers were randomly selected to observe pre and post the program. So a measure was developed by our group that would look at their use of these instructional approaches, phonological awareness activities, giving the children opportunities and support for early writing, math, etc. I'm going to focus on language and literacy outcomes today. So the first thing we wanted to see is, do the teachers change because of the program, and is that change varied? Do they change in response to the web-based professional development? And does it vary by whether they have a PDA, progress monitoring system, with or without a mentor? These are the main questions. The observers went into each classroom for about 2.5 hours using the teacher behavior rating scale, and we had found in previous studies this was very sensitive to teacher change and predicted gains in children's learning. If the teacher changed, we saw a nice correlation with change in child learning. Because this was the first observation system that really incorporated literacy, math, etc., it was used in the National Early Head Start evaluation and the preschool curriculum national cohort studies. it looks at a large number of areas of teacher behavior. The statistical models that we used controlled for pretest. We looked at, included in the models, mentoring, the feedback, limited versus detailed, the interaction of those two. And then we also looked at the 4 programs versus controls. And so I'm going to just very quickly go through these results so you can sort of see that we find, the bottom line of this story is we get the best outcomes, and they're not dependent on teacher training because we don't have side effects if we have a comprehensive approach. And so the total score on the teacher behavior scale sort of is what we found for many of the individuals. These two are not different from each other. So the PDA, or Palm Pilot, mentoring in this case did not add significantly above and beyond the PDA, over and above pencil paper compared to the controls. So in most of the teacher outcomes, we find, with the exception of a couple, that if you had to choose between a mentor and a PDA, and let me say the mentor's a lot more expensive than the PDA with the testing licenses for the children. These results lead you to take the professional development with the PDA. Now, in some cases, like phonological awareness, we find some mentoring effects. And what I found interesting, or find interesting, is the areas that are a little bit harder for teachers to learn to do are most impacted when you combine the mentor with the PDA. Phonological awareness is hard for these teachers to learn to do, at least all of the stages. They might do rhyming, but they don't move into the more complex stages. So you see here, the mentor plus the POM, the mentoring, has a nice added benefit over no mentor with the POM, which really is quite down there, but also is better than the non-mentor pencil conditions and mentor pencil conditions. Written expression, we found the same sort of effect. The mentor gives you some added benefit with the POM. And in all of those, we aren't seeing side effects. What's important about those findings is, and here with book reading, which is something teachers were more used to doing, the mentor didn't give us an added benefit over the POM. What for us was important is that we found this was equally effective with the teachers in Miami as the teachers in Prince George County. 4-year degree, high school degree, 1-year of college, very different education backgrounds. And that was what we had to find something, given this legislative mandate, that would be effective, no matter what type of setting we were working with. So I'm going to just skim through that. The child findings, and this is within that first year of training. These are the findings after the teachers, while the teachers are learning, we're taking these assessments of the children. And the children's gains have to come indirectly through our direct impact on the teacher. We're not working directly with any of these kids. We're trying to change the teacher, and at the same time looking at whether that's having some impact on the child. And we look at oral language, vocabulary, phonological awareness, and print letter knowledge with standardized types of assessments, pre and post. And what we find is vocabulary is typically a difficult area to move along, and a 0.20 small effect size is not embarrassing. It's pretty good. And we find that we get a nice but small effect with the group that had teachers learning the program with the mentor in the palm over everybody else. On oral language, we did see a pretest effect, and where this occurs is right here. The children who are lowest at the beginning of the year, but had a teacher who was getting a mentor in the palm, did significantly better than the kids in the control group who were lowest at the beginning of the year, and somewhat better if they were average. It did not impact the kids that were highest at the beginning of the year. Okay? The other groups, you don't really see any effect compared to the controls, no matter what the pretest is. In this case, we did not see a language difference. You'll see when I go to the state results, we have some effects by language. Typically, in the advantage being for the Spanish-speaking children. So the conclusions from that first study, which we were doing to figure out what we needed to put in the state program, was it needed to be comprehensive. But if it was comprehensive and intense, we could change the behavior of teachers in 1 year of working with them, and in turn the children's development. There were other findings for print knowledge and phonological awareness in that. And this will come out, the study I just described, in the Journal of Ed Psych, I'm hoping in the May issue. So then we went back to Texas and started trying to put this in place. We put out a request for proposals and awarded it to 11 communities. All that they had to say was, we will do our darn best to bring child care, Head Start, and public school together. We didn't ask that they had already done that, but they had to locate partners and bring them together into a partnership to try this out. We had a lot of committees that was mandated by the legislation, and so we had a lot of input from a lot of people, which is always challenging, but can be quite helpful. So these were our first communities. I sort of want to jump ahead because we had these first 11 communities. We randomly evaluated this in a random assignment study. This year we're in 3,800 classrooms in 39 communities, and in August we will move to 7,000 classrooms in the state. So this is really scaled up. But these were our communities, and we were hoping to have a nice representation of the whole state geographically, and we did do that pretty well. And you can see over here, they had to have representation in each of these, and at least one of these three, one or more of these three, these all being child care types of programs. There were 11 communities selected. We have a very high proportion of Hispanic American children. Typically, their home language will be Spanish. 20 classrooms in each of the 11 communities were selected, a stratified random assignment approach so that we balanced the type of program, gave us 10 classrooms in the program, 10 doing whatever they typically would do. Again, we were going to assess the teachers' change. These teachers are getting exactly the same program as what the teachers in the big 4-state study got. This time, though, we had already found that the PDA with feedback was important. And we decided mentoring was important since we found effects for a number of things with mentoring that were critically important, like phonological awareness, vocabulary building was another one. So the program had all three of those: mentor, professional development online with group learning, and the PDA. And the first year of the program, we were a bit at a disadvantage. Once you do this with the state running the show, versus getting a grant, competitive grant, when you get to do the design, the rules change. And so the money didn't come until the fall. So we didn't get to start at the beginning of the school year. By the time the communities were selected, the coordinators, mentors hired and trained, we were pre-testing mid-December, early January. And we had to report to the legislators by the end of May. So we had about 4.5 months that first year, random assignments. So we actually were thrilled to get these results. These are the classrooms randomly assigned to get the program, green, versus do whatever they typically did. And this is stratified, pretty balanced by the 3 types of programs. And so you can see we have anywhere from small to quite large effect sizes in teacher changes in those critical areas of instruction based on this comprehensive package that they're getting. Another problem we had, given the state rules, was year 2, when we thought we could have this beautiful control versus program design for a full year. No. We had to be sure every teacher got the program by year 2. So we had to move to a design where year 2 we had year 1 program teachers versus year 2 program teachers. But we also had a randomized group that were controls in year 1, and they had been randomized again as year 1 program teachers, so we could compare them to themselves. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's what this is. In year 1, these teachers were controls. They were randomized to be controls. But in year 2, they became program teachers. And so this is the same teacher compared, without the program, compared to themselves the next year with the program. Okay? And you can see quite large changes. That was striking. With the exception of math, which really, I don't think we gave math a good, Prentice, sorry to say, we didn't give math a good chance in this program. We were really focused on language and literacy in this early stage. Then we look at the children. We did not expect the children in year 1 with only 4.5 months to show the effect, and sure enough they didn't. We did not get child effects in that first half year between control and target. But we do see some effects of children whose teachers are getting the second year of the program, which has more pieces and parts to it. It's not just repetition, versus getting the first. And these are second year teachers. The children who were from Spanish-speaking homes show the effect. The children from English-speaking homes did not. Expressive vocabulary. What you're looking at here are the red and the blue are the controls, English, Spanish. And what we're really seeing is the Spanish effect, controls versus children whose teachers have the program. Control Spanish, program Spanish. And so we have a very nice effect there, whereas controls English, program English, no. We see the same thing but smaller effect here. Okay, and that's for expressive vocabulary. Print knowledge, we see an effect across all languages for letter naming, not sounds. So, that having been put in place, we were next asked, just because they thought we needed another challenge, to develop a system that would let people know whether teachers and programs and early childhood building sites were getting children ready for school. If you give them all these resources, is it really working? You know, and this is a system that would keep going year after year. And so bringing all these folks together in the expert panels, the decision was made that we would develop something that took into account lots of indicators in the pre-K classroom and the teachers' training and professional development, but we would link it to kindergarten outcomes, early kindergarten reading and social screening measures. So, we are at this point the only state that actually rates their pre-K quality based on kindergarten readiness. To date, most programs, if there is a program, do something like the Zagat restaurant model. It's a 1-star pre-K classroom, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star. But they don't know if those stars predict anything about what the child looks like once they get to kindergarten. It's often, does the classroom have print? Are the chairs appropriate size for the child? Is there some nice communication going on between the teacher and child? But the linkage to kindergarten is missing. This system is voluntary at this point. It's web-based. I'll show you. It's web-based. Programs go on and give us information about the facility, the number of children, the number of pre-K classrooms. They put attendance in of the children because we don't want to base their certification on a group of children that may not be showing up. And we do find attendance is predictive, as you might guess, thankfully. And then the teachers go on and they give us a lot of information about their curriculum, their practices. They upload lesson plans. They upload a dozen photographs of their classroom, which we code at the State Center for the presence of print, books in the classroom, library corners, all sorts of math materials, etc. And so it is web-based, which we can talk about in a second, brings a number of challenges. But we had to find a system that would be very cost efficient, because nobody was going to be bringing enough dollars to the table to let us observe live every program that wanted to be considered. We had to link with tests that were already in place. We did not want a high-stakes pre-K test added, and there was total consensus on that. And we were not going to be allowed to add assessments to the kindergarten programs across the state. So what we had in place was a reading screener. What we did get mandated by law was that it be given at the beginning of the kindergarten year and then could be continued. But they couldn't just give it any old time they want it, which had been the practice, even though it was supposed to provide them with diagnostic information about instruction. And the social screener at the beginning of the year. So we linked to that. Our hope is that at some point soon they'll add a math assessment in kindergarten, a screener, which isn't in place. So we had some challenges. Let me go back a bit. It needed to be, according to all the feedback we got, objective, fair, not competitive with existing accreditation systems like the ones from the National Association for Early Childhood, NAEYC. It needed to link to outcomes. That was a key here that I thought was great. It just did bring many challenges with it, as you can imagine. We didn't, at the time, have a tracking system in place. And so that is critical. They're going to find these kids and get their kindergarten screening based and link them to where they came from pre-K. The system seal looks like that. Each program that gets certified gets this great big banner, they get letterhead, and they love it. I mean, they're so thrilled to become a Texas certified program. The point being that they advertise that, and as this grows and becomes more the norm in the state, parents can look for this. And what it tells them is the children are getting into kindergarten from those programs ready with early reading screening skills and social development. So the programs go on in the fall. We get all this information. The teachers go on and fill out their information. And then early the next year, we find the children in kindergarten. The first year we did this, we had to locate those children by promising anything we could think of to motivate the public schools to give us the data. After that, a law was passed that they had to provide the data because we could never keep this up as this program advanced. We found with a very sophisticated statistical approach, latent class modeling, that there are three main areas that are most predictive on the pre-K side of children's social and reading at early kindergarten. And that's professional development of the teacher, instructional practices, particularly teachers that are intentional. They're able to talk and respond in ways that demonstrate they have intentionality in how they design and do things in their classroom, versus the teacher that grabs a book off the shelf that morning, reads a story, has not thought about the vocabulary that they plan to really introduce and build across the week for the child. So intentionality, and because we were linking to reading, right now early literacy is a very important area in the early childhood side. What the teacher's doing in terms of all the literacy areas of instruction. We were able, the very first pilot year, we called them the pioneer classrooms, to match, I think of 11,000 children, we matched 7,000 without having this law passed. Now we're doing much better than that. What we found, let me back up here. We found on that last bullet that our kids from well-implemented, it's called the TEEM program, Texas Early Education Model Program. We had another group of middle-class kids from private for-profit, middle and upper middle-class programs. Our children from the TEEM programs were comparable in reading and slightly better, statistically significant on their social behavioral early kindergarten readiness than middle-class children from educated homes. What we did find in those classrooms or programs is many of the children would be comparable to the low-income children from the TEEM programs on reading, in spite of the program, pre-K side of it, being quite impoverished in what it was doing for the children. So those programs do not get state certified because you have to meet criteria on both sides, the pre-K side and the K side. Probably you could imagine those children do okay in early kindergarten because they come from educated homes. And it doesn't matter so much what's happening in their pre-K environment. However, if you were a paying parent of one of these expensive early childhood programs, you would hope your child might do better than very poor children, no matter what program they came from. So this will highlight and put some pressure on all types of programs to do a better job on the pre-K side of things. We're now in our third year. There's about $200 million every 2 years of state funds that go what are called special grants for school districts in high need areas. This coming year we're expanding as much as we are because the Commissioner of Education in the state has deemed that you only get your money if you do this program. And you do both the TEEM side of it and you do the school readiness side. So it's really come to a large magnitude, and we're holding our breath that we can pull this off. So I'm happy to answer questions. I'm not sure how the time's going. But
a couple of quick questions.
yes.
Right. So, rich kids
Mm-hmm. But they get that often from birth. So by the time they go to pre-K, they've had 3 to 4 years of that. They've had 3 to 4 years of being read to, pointing out names of objects in the books, going to the zoo, etc.
I see. So the programs that you're talking about really are remedial for ages 0 to 3.
Well, it's to try to help these children catch up and things they haven't been exposed to, so that by the time they have to go to kindergarten, or they go to kindergarten, they're not a year behind in their development in these areas. Because typically when they enter as 3-year-olds, they're 8 to 12 months behind, particularly in language.
Another question?
Yeah, Dr. Landry, we actually had a question from online. The first question is, what were some of the biggest mistakes and surprises in your study?
Oh, golly.
Getting a question online.
Yes, not knowing that I could get questions from online. I think one of the biggest mistakes, and something we're still learning from, is how important it is to bring the educational leadership in the director, the principal, in a learning community, an educational community, on board, thoroughly understanding what's going to happen, and then to work with them to really help the teachers know before they start a program what they're getting into. There's a lot of have to do it fast, have to react, there's a time schedule, and there's a lot of, I think, confusion that you could bypass if you could do this upfront, collaborative sort of building that I feel we're learning to do a better job of.
The second question from the same student is, how much did this intervention cost per student and per teacher?
Okay, it cost, without the school readiness system in the model, the first year of the program is just under $10,000. That's not the teacher's salary or the infrastructure, the building, the furniture, etc. That's this TEEM program, which is the curriculum, the mentor, facilitator, the online license for each teacher, the PDA, the license for all the kids in the classroom for the PDA, and a lot of materials that particularly the child care programs need. Manipulatives, books, etc. The second year that drops to less than 50% because they have all the stuff. It's really all intellectual property for the classroom. And the third and fourth year, it's extremely minimal. It's the cost of the PDA license for each child, which is about $10 a child for the year.
And then one more comment from a student online was, so the upshot is if we teach teachers more and let them meet together and create learning communities, circles, and groups, then teachers learn something and their kids do better. And depending on the kid, level, language, the gains are different.
Yes. Very nice. Yeah.
I'm describing the results from Florida outside of Texas. You didn't find any interactions with teacher qualities. When you came back home to Texas,
Did we see it?
to evaluate the program, did you find any interaction?
Because of the small numbers we had in that random assignment and the fact that the encouragement of these partnerships was to put school degree teachers from the school funds into child care, we really didn't have a pure and a big enough sample size to look at the 3 different types of programs.
Some work has shown that.
Now, let me add this. When we look at who gets certified in that pioneer year, we had about 80% of the public school classrooms, 70% of the child care, and 65 or so percent of Head Start. So we do see somewhat of a difference.
Yeah. Stephanie Phillips, earlier found that actually in centers serving poor kids, sometimes you have higher teacher qualifications. So I was wondering whether this big bang with poor kids might be a result of the interaction with the quality of teachers in their settings.
Well,
Opposed to lower middle class
Yeah. I mean, Head Start serves some of the lowest income. And if anything, we saw the smallest proportion of Head Start get certified at this point.
For those people here, I believe you have a couple of spots on your calendar tomorrow morning.
I do.
I do. So
well, I don't know if I have any
you
open
do,
spots, but I have some filled spots.
In the event that you'd like to meet Dr. Landry for some more time, Hazel, who just popped her head in, let her know. We can, or me, just send us an email and we'll schedule something for the morning. But in the meantime, I think a round of applause is...
Oh, thanks.
And somewhere out there, people are applauding too.
Thanks very much.
Thank you
Enjoyed
very much.
it.
Thank you very much for coming. It's wonderful to see you. It was a great talk. Thank you.